I've done that.
Yep, me too.
Whole podcast. Like, oh no.
Oh, no.
You mind repeating that? What?
Everything that you just said, that was unbelievable. Could you just repeat that?
That's right. We'd like that confession again, sir, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yeah, what our very first one, I think I forgot to hit record until after the first speaker, and immediately at that point, I didn't know how to silence it. So it's in the middle of everything, it says, "We are recording," or something like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
I've done it so many times, I just keep thinking about it, so it's fine.
Yes. All right. All right, I am going to take the first minute today to go ahead and share our new AgriStress Response logo. And the reason that we decided to change it is that this one, it says more about what we stand for and who we are with AgriStress. What we want to do is we are reaching out to help each other. So that is where the arms, clasping arms, is coming from. We want to reach out to anyone who needs help, any colleagues in the mental health field, and we just want to work together. So that's what this whole group is about, is we're all working towards the same goal. So why don't we work together and help each other out? So that is our new AgriStress logo. And the reason that this mental health exchange is an option for us to offer is because we have funders, CHS and Nutrien. So we want to thank them each and every time for funding this, so that we can gather every month and share all these phenomenal ideas with each other and connect everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And Frank King is going to be our very first speaker. And if any of you don't know Mr. King, he is here. He's going to talk about suicide prevention. He does suicide prevention for everyone, but he does have something specific to the agricultural community. So we are very excited. Frank, you go ahead and take it anytime you're ready. You're a pro. We know you're a pro.
Yes. Let me start my clock. So 10 to 15 minutes. I don't go over. Let's see. All right. Nobody running a meeting like speakers who go over. I am Frank King. I am the mental health comedian. I know that's rather an odd juxtaposition of words, mental health comedian, although they're really nice keywords. The question is, hold on, a comedian talking about depression and thoughts of suicide, how does that work? Well, I think a good choice, a couple of reasons. If you think about it, the world's first comedian was the court jester. And the court jester's job was to speak truth to power on behalf of the powerless. I believe I speak truth to the power of mental illness, often on behalf of those powerless, in its grip with humor. I believe where there's humor, there is hope. Where there's laughter, there is life, that nobody really dies laughing. And depression and suicide run in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. 9 years later, my great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old and I screamed for days. I'll spare you the details. They are horror movie horrible. However, they're in my first of 8 TEDx talks on mental health. It's called A Matter of Laugh, L-A-U-G-H, or Death. It's on YouTube. A Matter of Laugh or Death, if you would like the details of finding my great aunt who died by suicide. And if you are that close to an actual suicide and you're already hardwired for it, then the chance of you seriously considering taking your life at some point later in your life go up. And that's what happened to me. In April of 2010, at the height of the recession, the speaking business bookings had dropped off 80% practically overnight. My wife and I lost everything we'd worked for in 25 years of marriage in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And that's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like. Spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. A friend of mine came up after a keynote recently and said, "Hey man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I said, "Hey man, could you try to sound a little less disappointed?" That's where the humor is in talking about mental health, mental illness, depression, thoughts of suicide. Not jokes, there's nothing to joke about, but funny, personal stories. And in my first TEDx talk, there was some humor, dark humor, but again, funny personal anecdotes. Before I did my first TED, I went on TED.com to see how other people handle the topic of suicide. Figuring out of hundreds of thousands of talks, must be 5, 6, 7 dozen on suicide. No, there were only 3 talks on suicide. And I said to the audience, then it hit me, well, duh, if you're really good at suicide, you're not going to be recording a TEDx talk. So that's where the humor is in the topic. And people ask me, does it keep you from getting booked to speak on suicide prevention as an agriculture, health, and safety issue because you're a comedian? No. No, oftentimes, most often, people want, the meeting planner wants lived experience, which I have. There are more nuts in my family than in a squirrel turd. They want the education, the takeaways, the learning objectives. I'm a train the trainer in mental health first aid and QPR, question, persuade, refer, and working minds. And the fact you can leaven it with a little well-placed organic humor, you know, they call it comic relief for a reason, is often why I get the engagement, because, you know, it's a dark topic. It's hard to digest. So if you can give them a little relief here and there, they're much more prepared for the next serious piece of business you're going to share. I myself live with 2 mental illnesses. One's called major depressive disorder, relatively common, depression, and something rare called chronic suicidal ideation. Chronic suicidal ideation, and there may be somebody listening right now who has this, means that for me and people in my tribe, the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. And I tell the audience, when I say small, my car broke down a couple of years ago. I had 3 thoughts unbidden. 1, get it fixed. 2, buy a new. And 3, I could just kill myself. That's chronic suicidal ideation. It's always on the menu as a solution. The upside of telling that story, and I have every keynote since 2014, often there's somebody in the audience, more often than not, at least one person in the audience, sometimes more, who have chronic suicidal ideation, and they have no idea it has a name. They just think they're some kind of freak and completely alone. I was doing an agricultural function. A young woman came up after my presentation and said, thanks for your keynote. I said, you're welcome. She said, I got to tell you, it made me weep. How did it make you weep? She said, you know your story about the car, get it fixed, buy a new one, or kill yourself? I said, yeah. She goes, I've been having those thoughts all my life. I didn't know that had a name. I thought I was some kind of freak and completely alone. And when I heard you say that out loud, that you have that, I realized for the first time in my life, I am not alone, and I wept. That's the power of starting the conversation. That's most often why people bring me in for that agricultural presentation. That's why they brought me in, was simply to start the conversation on suicide. Because by going on stage, sharing my story, being vulnerable, it gives other people in the audience permission to give voice to their feelings and experiences surrounding depression and thoughts of suicide. Sometimes 1 person, sometimes 10. I always do a little general Q&A and then say, look, if you have a question you want to ask or a story you want to share, and you don't want to share in front of everybody, I'll hang out and we'll take them individually, and they line up. And I've heard the most amazing things from people, some of whom I've just met. And most of the conversations start like this. I've never told anybody this. I get that a lot. Again, my job is to give them permission to give voice. And sometimes they don't want to share even individually after my presentation. So I always put my phone number up on the screen on a PowerPoint slide. And I say, look, if you're depressed, if you're suicidal, call the new 3-digit suicide prevention lifeline, 988, or text 988. If you're just having a really bad day, call a crazy person, and here's my cell number. And about once every couple of weeks, I'll get a call from somebody. And you know, oftentimes it's a question they have about themselves or a loved one. 1 person dies by suicide every 9 minutes in the US, but hardly anybody talks about it unless you bring it up, and then almost everybody has a story. And that's my job, is to simply bring it up, break the silence, break the stigma. And in agriculture, many times it's a solo entrepreneur. I would imagine probably predominantly male, although there are lots of women in farming. And, you know, it's people who are relatively tough or feel they're tough and less likely to reach out for help, especially men. 8 out of 10 people who die by suicide in the US right now are men. And people ask me, you know, when I say the top half dozen occupations include, construction, farming, fishing, forestry. Why farming? Well, again, it's a solitary occupation oftentimes. And farmers, people in the agricultural business, are subject to all sorts of things that other industries are not. The weather, financing, commodity prices, tariffs, floods, droughts. I mean, I've got a friend who's a farmer, farmed from the time he was 8 till the time he was 38 and became a humorous agriculture speaker. And he has a talk he does called Dirt in His DNA. It's a kind of person, and that's how he feels about his what he did for a living for all those years in agriculture. He felt like he had dirt in his DNA. He was born to farm. And now he entertains around the country agricultural, banquets and such as a speaker. So the good news, finally some good news after 8 minutes and 19 seconds. The good news is 8 out of 10 people who are suicidal are ambivalent. 9 out of 10 give hints in the last week leading up to the attempt, which means you can make a difference. You can save a life, and you can do it by doing something as simple as what we're doing right here. And that is starting a conversation if you know how. And before we part company, I'm going to give you your first lesson in mental health first aid. Question often comes up, how do you know if somebody's depressed? Well, there are some signs. These are not all inclusive, but 3 of the top signs are eat too much or can't eat, sleeps too much or can't sleep, has trouble getting out of bed in the morning, but tends to rally in the afternoon, almost like a different person, letting their personal hygiene go. Normally they're pretty well put together. And this day, their hair's a little dirty, clothes aren't quite so clean. It may be because they're having trouble getting out of bed in the morning and running a load of wash, taking a shower. The question comes up, what do you say to somebody who's depressed? Let's start with what you don't say, though you mean well. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, turn that frown upside down. Have you tried fish oil? Yeah, I can't tell you how many times. Here's what you do say. I'm here for you and I mean it. I know you're not lazy, crazy, or self-absorbed. I know that depression is a mental illness. The good news is with time and treatment, things will get better. I will take the time. I will help you get the treatment. And here's the tough part of this conversation. You have to ask them in no uncertain terms, are you having thoughts of suicide? Just like that. Yes, and if you can't ask them that, find somebody you can. If you can't find anybody, look at the show notes for this episode and my phone number will be there. I'll ask them. There's an urban legend that you should never mention the word suicide in front of somebody who is depressed. And I love the reasoning. It might give them the idea. Yeah, like it never crossed my mind. In fact, the reverse is true. If somebody's thinking about suicide or somebody's terribly depressed, and you mention suicide, the chances of them dying by suicide go down rather than up. Okay. So let's say they're not forthcoming that they're having thoughts of suicide, but you suspect in your gut they are. How would you know? Well, there are signs. They talk about death and dying. Maybe you catch them Googling death and dying or how to kill yourself. Death and dying appears maybe as a theme in their artwork or their music or their writing. They're getting their affairs in order. And a big one in that category is they're giving away prized possessions because they want to make sure the possessions go to the people they want them to go to when they're gone. They're gathering the means to die by suicide, whether it's buying a firearm or stockpiling medication. Women attempt suicide 3 times as often as men. Men tend to complete because they use a firearm. Here's a counterintuitive one. They've been depressed for a long time and now they're happy for no apparent reason. And you're happy because, Lord, they're happy. Problem is they may be happy because they've chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain is coming to an end. That's what a lot of people, neurotypicals, don't understand about suicide. Most often it's not about wanting to kill yourself. I did not want to kill myself. I simply wanted to end the pain. So what do you say to somebody who admits they're suicidal? Here's what you don't say. You're being melodramatic. You're just looking for attention. Nobody who talks about it ever does it. Here's what you do say. Very simple. Do you have a plan? And if they have a plan, what is your plan? And if it's detailed, time, place, and method, then you need to get them to a mental health facility as soon as possible, simply for evaluation. See what it is that's causing. Is it ordinary run-of-the-mill depression? Is it depressive state of bipolar disorder? What is it? And perhaps medicated. And if the medication they're taking is not working, there's now a DNA cheek swab test. They take your DNA and they try to match it to the antidepressant that will work best with your metabolism. A couple $100 and most insurances cover. So that way you're not quite the lab rat, go on, doesn't work, taper off, go on, doesn't work, taper off. Okay. Now, suppose they have a plan, but it's not particularly detailed. And this is not any book anywhere. It's not in any course I ever took. A psychiatrist and I came up with this. So they got a plan, but it's not really detailed. What do you say? I would say, okay, tell me, you're going to kill yourself? And if they say no, I say, tell me why not. Make them give voice to whatever it is that's keeping them here. Because something is keeping them here. Their children, their spouse, religion, their pets, something. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. Make them give voice to that. People occasionally ask me why I don't die by suicide, having chronic suicidal ideation. Well, I have a number of reasons, but the big one is that my mom and dad got married in the mid-40s, 1940. Both wanted a family, had trouble conceiving. My mom did conceive. She got pregnant, carried it to term, 9 months, and shortly after birth, it passed away. A year later, she got pregnant again, carried it to term, and shortly after birth, it passed away. Somewhere, somehow, she found the courage to try again. Then I was born and try a fourth time, and my sister was born. So my feeling is she was so brave and worked so hard to bring me here that I have to be at least as brave and work at least as hard to stay until my appointed time. Now, let me leave you on a high note. Every now and then, as somebody who lives with two mental illnesses, when somebody says, how you doing? I tell them. I love messing around with normal people. I was exhausted. I got in the back of this Uber, nice young man driving, our eyes locked in the rearview mirror. He goes, hey man, how you doing? And I thought, I'm going to tell him. I'm depressed and suicidal. How about you, dude? He says, what am I supposed to say to that? I said, do you really want to know? He goes, yeah. I said, you're supposed to ask if I have a plan. So he thinks about it. Our eyes are still locked in the mirror, as you might imagine. He goes, do you have a plan? And then it hits him and he turns in his seat and he goes, oh, dear God, does it involve Uber? Best laugh I had all week. So anyway, 14 minutes, 25 seconds. Yes, mic drop, boom.
That is perfect, Frank. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know that you offer your speaking skills, as a keynote and everything. Do you have any kind of workshop, anything on your website that we can share with the audience today?
I can, if you like, send you links to my first four TEDx talks.
Okay.
I don't have a class or a course.
Okay. I didn't know if you also offered a workshop for when you do speak at conferences, that we could share with everybody too. But if you can either post those in the chat or email them to me and we'll send them out in our email. But if you could, in the chat, definitely go ahead and put your contact information.
Mm-hmm.
We will send it out in an email afterwards, but in case anybody just wants to get there right now, we'll
that's right. A phone's ringing. Just a second.
Yeah. And if anybody has any questions for Frank, feel free to put them in the chat or just go ahead and unmute and you can ask him.
You can ask me right now.
Yeah.
Not everybody at once.
I will ask, how did you get in mental health within farming, within the agriculture side?
My farmer friend, Jerry Carroll. We are probably my best friend in comedy, and we've been chatting about agriculture. And I did a little research and realized that agriculture is in the top 10 at-risk occupations. And knowing what he went through in his life, I mean, it's a tough business, extremely tough business. I thought, you know what? Now the problem has been agriculture is a tough nut to crack when it comes to speaking on suicide prevention. When I first started speaking on it, I called the Farm Bureau and they said they were offended that I called them and brought up the topic. And I said, you're in the top 5 at-risk occupations. Don't you think it should be something you're, I don't know, at least batting back and forth? But yeah, so I've done a few agricultural events. Montana Department of Agriculture and the Farm Bureau, I did the Young Farmers and Ranchers. But that's the exception. Iowa, I did an engagement in Iowa. But I've only had a half a dozen in the agricultural sector, whereas in construction, I'm hired a half dozen times a year in construction, dentistry, veterinary medicine, physicians, nurses, agriculture. And I don't know if it's just the ethos, that sort of will muddle through. We've handled worse, kind of I don't know. But fortunately, the dam I did 2 gigs in 1 year, one in Iowa and one in Montana last year. So I'm hoping the dam is broken and I'll get more
Yeah.
requests.
Yeah, I know that's what we're trying to do here with this group is, open the dam so that more and more of our farmers and ranchers feel more comfortable reaching out for help, because it is that pride and sense of weakness that we're battling, that mentality to try to get them to say, you know what, I'm more important than my pride or feeling vulnerable. So we appreciate your help.
Yeah, I wish the Farm Bureau, the national, would decide we're going to have an initiative. This is getting ridiculous, and we need to push this out to all the chapters.
Yeah. All right. I do not see anything in chat, but Frank, go ahead and share your email or contact information in the chat, and then we'll definitely go ahead and send that out afterwards. So we are going to, yes, ma'am.
I saw someone unmute. I wasn't sure if someone was going to ask a question or not. I just wanted to pause to see if.
Question?
It was me. Hi, can you guys hear me well?
Yes.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm kind of driving a little bit and trying to focus also, but I do have a question. I'm a social worker, and from time to time, I hear often the discussion of lack of mental health services due to lack of medical insurance for the farmers and ranchers, because a lot of times, they don't have either the access or kind of like you said, you go through the ups and the downs of finances. And so there's not a lot of stability. Do you see that as a concern as far as availability of coverage for mental health services for farmers and ranchers?
Yes, and it's not just farmers and ranchers. What I recommend, like when I'm doing a dental group, if the dentist notices something, or the hygienist, and they want to provide resources for the patient, my advice is to go to Google, type in free mental health services and the name of the county. And what you'll find is you'll get a list of free services and services on a sliding scale. And then, of course, the Cadillac, you got to have good insurance and a low copay kind of mental health services. Also, there's an outfit called NAMI, National Alliance Mental Illness, NAMI. And everything they do is free. And they have 12-week classes for families of someone who's living with a mental health issue. What to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do, so forth. And family-to-family counseling, where in each family they have the same person they love, the same issue, same condition, and peer counseling. And again, it's all free. National Alliance Mental Illness. And most counties in most states have a chapter of NAMI. Mental Health America, same thing. MHA, Mental Health America, roughly the same thing. So, but I would go Google. I think you'll find free services and sliding scale services based on income. And of course, the Cadillac version where, you have to have really good insurance. But usually I print out first 3 pages of Google. I mean, I rarely go to page 2 of Google. There's an old joke. If you wanted to escape and hide from the world, where would you go? Page 2, Google, because nobody goes there. But in this case, go to page 3, print the 3 pages out, and there should be something on there, either free or on a sliding scale.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Larissa, for asking that. Philip said in the chat, he works with a lot of military and first responders. Like farmers, they tend to be a high percentage gun owners. I have loved the cultural competency trainings by Walk the Talk America about working therapeutically with gun owners. Do you have any insights or ideas discussing guns with depressed farmers?
Yes, the red flag laws that they brag about, I'm not a big fan. I think if you have a weapon and you have an issue, that I've got to deal with my neighbor across the street. If I get because I have guns, I'm not a gun. I'm a nut, but I'm not a gun nut. But I own guns. And I told him, look, Randy, if I'm having trouble, I'm going to bring these guns over to you, and you don't give them back until my psychologist calls and said you can give them back to him. So I think personal responsibility rather than have the law come in and take guns away from somebody. I mean, that's just good. Certain parts of the country, that's just going to stir the pot. And military, I spoke at 4 military bases last year, and the military is trying harder when it comes to their soldiers to provide mental health services. One of the problems with the VA is a goodly number, more than half of the veterans are not registered with the VA, and the VA can't help you unless you're registered. So if you know a veteran who's not registered with the VA for their benefits, encourage them to get registered. You know, sometimes they feel like, well, you know, I don't really need it that bad, and I don't want to take money from somebody else. It's not a, you know, it's not a zero-sum game. There's money for everybody in the VA. They just need to know you exist. So that'd be my advice.
Wonderful. Frank, we thank you so much. I know you can't stay on, I think, for the whole thing, but we appreciate your insight and sharing with us today.
And I just put my contact information, phone
Yes.
number, website, and all that nonsense in the chat.
Awesome. All right. Jeni from Wounded Warrior Project is going to be our second speaker today. So Jeni, we'll go ahead and let you start sharing your PowerPoint, and you can get started anytime.
Alrighty, I'm just going to talk for a second before we throw it up there. There's a lot before we get into those programs. Hi, everyone. I am not a comedian. My name is Jeni Pedroza. I work over here at Wounded Warrior Project. For those of you who do not know about Wounded Warrior Project, we are one of the largest nonprofits for post 9/11 veterans in the country, and for our service members and veterans who live abroad as well. If I told a team right now that we're only statewide, they'd be like, I just talked to Poland. I'm like, okay. So any service member who served post 9/11, like I had mentioned, with an injury, illness, or wound can be a part of Wounded Warrior Project. We don't have any fees. We don't have dues, anything like that. Our veterans are, we call them warriors. I may use those two words interchangeably, by the way. I catch myself all the time, but they pay their dues on the battlefield. So the way it works is we have over 200,000. It's probably a way bigger number now. We've had some pretty large increases with the end of the Afghanistan withdrawal. We've had a lot more people register with the financial crisis across the whole nation and some of the world. We've had a lot of registrants lately, but it's definitely over 200,000. And our mission is to honor and empower wounded warriors. And our vision is what I think is kind of neat, and what's kept me here for so many moons is we're trying to foster the most well-adjusted generation of veterans this country has ever seen, right? So, well, how do you do that? One, that isolation piece, right? We try to keep everyone connected with constant communication and, email. Carrie and I were just talking that, we've all become way more tech savvy over the last 2 years. So we've been trying to reach everyone as much as we can. Our major large programs, and I'm going to talk about mental health here in a second, but our larger programs, we work in like 3 different areas almost. So, well, 4. Connection, so that we do a weekly newsletter that has local engagement events. We just did a give back. Again, we're all over the country, but I'm in Chicago, at Brookfield Zoo, and the warriors and their families got to come with the kids and see the Christmas lights and the animals, and Santa came in, and it was just, that's just one of the many events that probably happened that week across the country, probably 20. So we try to keep them connected in that way. Also, with our rural areas, we know that you can't really get that close. So we try to do peer support groups, which is connection as well. We work on the financial side of the house, where if our warriors and families, we also serve families, excuse me, let me step back there. Caregivers do a lot, as we know. With this program, in the financial side of the house, we can do one-time grants to help. At the beginning of the pandemic, we did reach out to almost all those 200,000 to see how they were doing as a check-in. We also have a wonderful benefits team. Wounded Warrior Project did a lot to pass the most recent PACT Act with what we would know as toxic exposure. And our benefits team are all registered VSOs, and they can help with your claims and, things of that nature. So if you've got anyone over there, we have a wonderful Warriors to Work program. If anyone's ever worked with veterans, sometimes it's like, hey, yeah, I had a squad and I had 5 trucks. No, you were, leading and owned $500,000 worth of equipment, right? They help you get those military terms translated into civilian terminology to get that out there into the world. And we're like, wow, that was a lot I signed for, wasn't it? Our benefits team, Warriors to Work is phenomenal, but when we get into the mental health program side of the house, we're going to talk in great detail about those, but we also have like a body side, right? So we do have a lot of physical limitations, but we have a really large program called Soldier Ride, where you get you back out there connected. They usually happen in the major cities. Wounded Warrior Project gets you out there. Everything is covered while you're there. And it's like, well, one thing I've noticed a lot with my dear farmers, especially the time I got to spend with them at the Farmer Veteran Coalition conference, was time is sometimes not very ready available, especially during certain times of the year. They're teaching me, you guys, I'm a city girl. Come on. So when we're looking at this, it's like, that's the best part about all of these programs at Wounded Warrior Project. They're going to listen to the person who is on the other line. They're going to, or who's in front of them, and see what works best in their world at this moment. Sometimes it's like, we have all of these great things, do it all at once. And then we become overwhelmed and we start to back up a little bit. So in the mental health side, where I reside, now I'm going to share, okay? Just wanted to get it all out there for those of you who had no idea what Wounded Warrior Project was. You're like, she's really excited about therapy. I don't get it. It's fun to me. Let's see. There we go. We're gonna go forward again or back. Ta-da. I had you guys up on the big screen, but it didn't make any sense. You're not here with me. So again, our mission is here, and we're gonna honor and empower. So we have a few different type of mental health programs, and it's on a continuum of support. And when a warrior or a family support member calls into our resource center and we get them registered and they say, hey, I'm interested in getting connected with mental health programs, they're going to get you directly to one of our mental health triage teammates, and we're going to take the time to figure out where they fit within this continuum of support. So we have programs like Project Odyssey, triage is what I just spoke about, Wounded Warrior Project Talk, and Warrior Care Network. So the triage team, we listen again, like I had already mentioned, to that person in this moment and what works best in their world, and then we start from there. Wounded Warrior Project Talk, when I was speaking at the Farmers Veterans Coalition, this was the one that kind of, I got a little bit more of a, how do I say, piqued their attention. Because what this is, it's not clinical counseling, right? Some of us, it's just medical model might not be there right now. With Wounded Warrior Project Talk, they are mental health teammates. They call once a week for 20 minutes, same bat time, same bat channel. And how that works is it's going to be the same person. So you can't BS a BSer, right? And they're going to create mental health goals. And that might be, you know, what we're going to do now is the goal will be to get registered at the VA. The goal will be to, I don't know, make sure tonight that I actually eat a full meal. It depends on what that human being who's speaking really wants to do, something that could foster their mental health. 20 minutes once a week, and they get to pick the time. It's not like, I used to joke that I get letters in the mail and they tell me to go to the VA in 2 weeks at 1300. And it's like, I didn't tell you I could go then. Like, hold on. So now what's happening is they make the time they want to do this COA, and they have that extra layer of support. I love our talk team. Let's see here. And this warrior, Angie Peacock, I actually just checked in with her earlier yesterday. So she's doing great. These are real people, my friend. Then we have our Warrior Care Network, and that's our biggin. We work with 4 academic medical centers across the country. Again, free. I say that now because I've talked to warriors before, and they're like, you said the whole spiel, I was half listening. I needed to hear the free part again. It's okay. And we work with 4 academic medical centers across the country. So we have Rush here in Chicago, UCLA, Mass General in Boston, and Emory down in Atlanta. And we offer a free 2-week intensive outpatient PTSD program. Now, I say it's intensive outpatient, and you're like, wow, it's only in those areas. So it's kind of more of like a dorm-like setting where they go into their intensive outpatient program during the day. And they're meeting with individual therapists and group therapists, but they also do a bunch of adjunct therapy. So we do a lot of mindfulness and yoga and art therapy. While they're there, they get, I think those 2 weeks of therapy all condensed is about a year. So it's all right there for them. State-of-the-art treatment. Let's see. And another cool thing, and I geek out because I am on the triage team, is when they're graduating, we all go speak to these cohorts and let them know that my team will be following up with them in about 2 weeks when they get home to see how they're doing and how we can support the rest of their journey. Project Odyssey is the big one. This is the next one the farmers seem to love. Project Odyssey is that non-traditional mental health care. Some people get a little about therapy. So what we do here is, and this is where I started. So you guys thought I was excited about triage. Wait till you see this one. So what happens here is the same team will reach out, they get you screened, they find out what Project Odyssey would be best for you. So what is Project Odyssey? It is a 5-day mental health workshop, not a retreat. That's what I tell my warriors all the time. We're gonna work ya, but we use nature as the backdrop. And how we do this is we're able to bring them together again with other veterans. We build the group, and while we're out there, we're in the moment. We're doing things experientially. I try not to use words I can't spell, but that's learning by doing, pardon. And how we do that is, say we talk about, stressors and what's an appropriate response for a stressor. And, we might be joking around a fireside or something like that. Well, then our next activity might be a high ropes course or skiing or hiking or something that's going to evoke that stress into a safe space. We try to challenge them out of their comfort zone throughout almost the whole trip. And sometimes just getting on the plane to go is the challenge. And we work with them there in the moment for those 5 days. The whole goal of that, if the people ask about the metrics and things, is we're trying to increase resiliency and overall psychological well-being. But we do that by getting you out there. So throughout that week, we also, so the same team that screens them, that books their flight, that lives with them for 5 days in the woods, is also going to follow up with them on a goal for 12 full weeks. So when you see it's a 12-week mental health program, I tell my warriors and their families, hey, 5 days out of the home. That's it. Everything else is before and after. Now, we have a version for male veterans. We have a version for female veterans. We have a version for couples. And just this summer, I'm so excited to announce we're going to start having them for families. So we just get them out there a little bit. We have them all year round, which again, helped some of my farmers friends when we were talking about it. We have them all year round. And again, it's free. Let's see here. More about Project Odyssey. We're going to get some skills. We're going to learn some goals, but we call them sneaky skills. So like if there's a 15-minute break, we're like, okay, go use the washroom, go fill your water, smoke them if you got them, whatever. At the end of the week, we talk about, hey, you got back here. You just worked on time management for 5 days. Check off your skill, buddy. You did it. Don't tell me you can't. So I just love this program. And I have no idea how fast I'm talking because I am passionate. Can you all tell? Let's see. I don't know if this is the end. I always get scared when I go to switch a slide and I'm going to end the whole call. All right. And this is kind of what we talked about in the beginning, right? We have our alumni team, our physical health and wellness program. They start with expos, almost similar to Odyssey. And they do a little bit of nutrition and they do a little bit of adaptive sports. They do a little bit of, getting that body moving again, some sleep hygiene, some step counts. And then they follow up with them with a goal as well. Now, one of the things we find with our veterans is sometimes we don't want to work out because we had to do PT too much. So this is able to get them back in there and live that healthy lifestyle. And then with our more severely wounded, as we know, it's some of that's difficult and no one ever had the time or the resources to teach them how to use some of these adaptive sports, things like that. That's another great program. Let's see, what else do we have here? I think we We've started in the last 2 years a huge gaming initiative. Not that farmers have a lot of time to game, but hey, sometimes it's just that connection, and we're on the server and all of that stuff, and it's pretty interesting. And if you know anyone, all they have to do is call our resource center and we will get them directed. Our resource center is, and I think the hours of operations are there. I can't see it because I'm looking at y'all, but 7 to 7, is that what it says? Oops. I'm not
9 to
typing.
9.
9 to 9, there we go. We got another team out in Texas too for our resource center. They used to just be in Jax, so now we have 2. Yeah, so I know I speak very fast. Again, that's the up north girl in me, can't stop that. But also, I'm very excited about these programs. I've been with Wounded Warrior Project for 9 years. I served for 10 years before that, and in between I went to school. I'm a counselor, just not yours, is what I tell my warriors. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see everyone's faces. My bad. There we go.
Jeni, I just learned a whole lot about Wounded Warrior Project. I didn't realize you had all these other fingers out there.
Yeah.
So now I just wrote down a bunch of stuff that I'm gonna be able to share on our social media page.
Beautiful.
Since I didn't realize that, yeah, that was all out there. Feel free again, go ahead and unmute or put in the chat if you'd have any questions for Jeni and any of those projects that are included in the Wounded Warrior Project. And then if I know we're going to send out your contact information, but
Yeah.
if anybody needs it right now, can you throw that in the chat
Absolutely.
too? And yeah, they can copy and paste or just go ahead and click on it. Yeah, so I think many of us in this group know of Wounded Warrior, but probably not all of what you do. It's amazing. No wonder you're always so busy.
Yeah. Well, the best thing too is, and there's one thing for my friends on here who might like this information. Every year we do an annual warrior survey, and we send it out to all of those warriors and the annual warrior survey is just for our warriors, but it goes out, and then the data that we get from that, it's one of the largest longitudinal surveys of post 9/11 veterans out there. It's free if anyone ever wanted to look at that data on our website. So when I speak to the universities, to the counseling students, they all just perk up about it. But mostly the mental health professionals, when I speak with them as well, they're like, wow, I would never have thought that. And it gets a really good snapshot of it. I always tell everyone that the post 9/11 veterans are just me, but male, 42, did a few years, couple deployments under the belt, got a VA connection, but doesn't go,
Yeah, and this is a perfect project as we see more and more veterans transferring into farming after they get out. It's a perfect partnership.
Yes. I appreciate all of the time.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are at our final speaker, Miss Denise Robinson. Some people might have previously known her as Roland. Is that how you say it, Denise?
Yeah.
Okay. I forgot to ask you if you have a PowerPoint to share.
I do,
If you
yeah.
just go ahead and share that, and you take off whenever you're ready.
You can see the wrong screen. Just give me a sec.
I believe Denise too is our second volunteer that we've ever had contact us and say, hey, I would like to speak. So if there's anybody else in this group that would like to speak, just reach out to me. We will definitely put you on the schedule.
You guys can see my notes, right? I don't want to share that screen.
We don't see your notes, but we see next slide.
Okay. Sorry. I don't know. what's happening. Okay, we'll just do this.
Yeah,
You
it
guys can
looks
see the
good.
next slide. That's totally fine. I don't know how to change it. Yeah, so my name's Denise Robertson. I'm actually up in Canada. I'm in Ottawa. So I'm from the organization Farm Management Canada. And I'm just here to chat with you guys about a survey that we released back in 2019. Called Healthy Minds, Healthy Farms, Exploring the Connection Between Mental Health and Farm Business Management. So I'm just going to chat with you about that report that we put out. You might be able to see some of my notes because I do have some, but it's not a big deal. So I just want to quickly mention who we are at Farm Management Canada. So we've been around for 30 years. It was 30 years just this past year. And we were established to help farmers build capacity to confront change in confidence and seize opportunity. So we coordinate, develop, disseminate farm business management resources and tools. So we do this variety of ways. We have tons of workshops, webinars, we have an annual conference, we write research reports, and we work with tons of different groups across the country to help, you know, engage and provide knowledge to farmers across Canada. So just about the Healthy Minds, Healthy Farms report. So our objective, was to improve our understanding about the relationship between farm business management practices and farmer mental health. So our research methods are here. So we conducted a lit review. We cited over 150 gray and academic sources. We conducted a nationwide survey in which we got a little over 1,700 Canadian farmers responded. So that we thought was a really good representation of across the country. There was 14 in-person focus groups. And then we also spoke with 113 participants in total in those focus groups. And then there was also 72 one-on-one interviews. So this was on the phone, at least an hour call, speaking with farmers one-on-one and asking, you know, going through our list of questions. So I'm just going to run through some of the big pieces of the report. I can share the report afterwards with everyone. And of course, Carrie, you can send it out as well if you want to, you know, get to the nitty gritty. There's also a really condensed executive summary that's helpful as well. So stress in the Canadian farming population, 75% of our farmers are stressed. So these are the top 3 causes that came out of the report. There was a bunch of options, and these were the top 3 that came up. So obviously unpredictability of the ag sector. So that's, you know, extreme weather, changes in markets, workload pressures and lack of time, and financial pressures. We saw women and young farmers were more likely to report high stress. Sorry, I'm just reading through some of this. I'm sure you guys can see my notes. Yeah, a lot of women just feel the pressure to prove themselves in the industry. It's obviously a very male-dominated industry. And young farmers just have a lot of new things coming up. Obviously, we talk about transition planning and stuff. That's a big stressor for new farmers, new entrants that established farmers don't necessarily deal with as much. So this was just a quote from a female farmer that we heard from. As a farm wife, it falls on me when a kid is sick or when someone needs to be picked up from school. Not that I would have it any other way. Our kids are the most important thing to us, but you think you have your day planned, and that's when everything changes. So these were a list of the changes in behavior that you can see in farmers when their stress is heightened. So there's a list of them there. You can read through them as you'd like, but farmers with growing and expanding businesses show higher levels of stress than mature, as I was mentioning. And in times of great stress, those in growing operations were more likely to report feeling less motivated about work. So these are just kind of the changes in behavior that we saw most farmers identify with that they felt showcased when they were experiencing additional stress. So stress and farm safety is obviously a big one. We work with a group up in Canada called CASITS, the Canadian Agriculture Safety Association. So we work with them with some of these questions, but obviously when your mental health is lacking, it can increase some farm safety accidents. So it was just something, part of our survey that was very highlighted that people felt that farm safety was impacted when stress was higher. These are some of the, mental health and farm business management connections that we found in the report that were really positive to us, because obviously as an organization that promotes business management, there is some good sides of it. 21% of farmers indicate that they regularly follow written plan. 48% indicate that they rarely or never do, but 88% of the farmers who do follow written business plan report it's contributed to their peace of mind. And then also farmers who use written business plans also follow other business practices, health and safety standards, record keeping, benchmarking, and seeking training. So that having a written business plan also applies to, doing a lot of the other business aspects as well. And then farmers who use written business plans are more likely to adopt effective coping mechanisms. And we think that's because they have the plan written out. They have something to fall back to when they're stressed, and they're able to, reference those things versus not having a written business plan. You're kind of more working off of your coping mechanisms when you're going through those things. So we came up with 4 recommendations that came out of this report. I'm going to list through the recommendations, but in each of the recommendations, there's about 10 action items that will help us reach these recommendations. I'm not going to go through those. They're in the survey, and there's, a lot of detail, in the report, but I will share that afterwards, obviously. So these are the 4 recommendations that throughout the report we thought could help us increase business management practices that will help mental health. So the first one is continue raising awareness around the importance of farmer mental health, support the improvement of mental health literacy for farmers and those supporting farmers, deliver business management advice, tools, and training that focuses on risk management and preparedness as a means for facing uncertainty, and then advocate for farmer-specific mental health services. So just a few things here. I just wanted to highlight a few of the programs that we have that I think help contribute to our recommendations, and then also just to, increasing adoption. So the first one that's listed there is our leadership program. So it's about 12-week program, but there's a 3-day in-person residency. So it's a leadership program for farmers, farm managers, anyone working on a farm. So it includes monthly group coaching, personal coaching, and it's a really personal group-led leadership program. To the right there is our National Farm Business Management Resource Center. So it's a national resource center. You can look up resources by commodity, by province, by issues. You can look up transition plans, business plans, all that kind of stuff. On the bottom left there is just our national conference. So we just had a conference in November in Canmore, which is just north of Alberta. Excuse me, it's in Alberta, it's just north of Calgary. So we hosted a 2.5-day conference, and I want to say 2 or 3 of our sessions had to do with mental health. So we're obviously big advocates for mental health conversations in the ag industry. So we dedicate as many sessions as we can and bring in folks from obviously across Canada, but we've had lots of international folks as well come and speak to the farmers at the conference. And then the bottom right there is just our AgriShield platform. So it's a comprehensive risk assessment and mitigation platform for Canada farmers developed under ourselves. And it's the first platform to offer a 360 view to help assess and put a plan in place to manage risks on the farm. So that's a full platform website that we run. And then just quickly, I wanted to list some Canadian resources that we share with our network. So the first one there is the Canadian Young Farmers Forum. It runs a hashtag self-care resource center. So it's a website with blogs, with resources, with, kind of like ours, provincially, commodity-wise, you name it. To the right there is Rooted in Strength. It's a report written by FCC, and it was written before our report. So we reference it a lot. And it was kind of the first of its kind in Canada to do a deep dive research into what this looks like. On the bottom left there is, so that's a little sticker that we actually handed out at our conference. It's for inside your cabs. And you put it on your windshield, and it's a little QR code that you scan, and it's a mental health first aid kit. So Do More is a super wonderful organization. We work with them a ton, and they're a national voice and champion for mental health in Canadian ag. They do a lot of research, but they also have a ton of programs. They host free workshops across the country. They fund other groups to host their workshops. So they're a really, really great resource. And they're just trying to get in every community that they can and host these mental health first aid workshops. Then the bottom right, there's a new organization that actually just started a few years ago. It's called the Canadian Centre for Agriculture Wellbeing. So a few researchers from University of Guelph have been kind of big advocates in this space, and they did a research report a few years ago and have updated it since, and they've now opened up their own center to continue the research that they've been doing. So that's it for me. I do just want to mention that our report came out in 2019. So obviously things are different, but they're not. So we feel like in Canada, the adoption of these topics, the conversations have been doing so much better. I remember when this report came out to now, like things are so different. CASA that I mentioned before, their conference in October was just about mental health. So there's a lot more conversation happening, which is super positive. But with COVID, there's obviously been a ton more stressors on the ag industry in Canada. And I'm sure down where you guys are as well, but it's just, the conversation is happening a lot more, we feel like, but it's still a huge struggle. And there's obviously so many like new struggles that have come that haven't happened, weren't around in 2019, you know, talks of financial crisis and all those things. So there's lots of new stressors coming up that weren't identified in our report, but we feel like it's a good baseline. And we, you know, just try to continue updating our programs as best we can. So that's it for me.
I was writing furiously on those resources, and then I was like, oh, I'll just take a screenshot real quick here.
Oh, yeah.
Because we have at AgriSafe, we have a lot of Canadian partners. And then, of course, you know, all the US that lives in those northern states. We would like to share that with them as well. God, I have a ton of notes here.
I did just share in the chat. So it's called it our media kit, but it's basically everything to do with this project. So there's lots of little graphics that are super shareable. And then there's also like our environmental analysis, which lists tons of programs, because we went through basically every program possible, not only in Canada, but across the world in mental health in agriculture. And then there's the full report. And then, as I mentioned, the executive summary as well. That's just obviously a lot easier to read. The report's not very long. It's about 50 pages, but there's lots of good information in there. And then, as obviously I highlighted our recommendations, but all the kind of actions that we think can help move these recommendations forward are in there as well. So
okay, so that report is viewable within that link that you just posted, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because I already have a list of people that I want to forward that on to.
Yeah,
they like that that data to be able to compare to.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then if you would in the chat, we're going to send out the chat as well. Just go ahead and put your contact information in there too. We're going to have a whole lot in this email being sent out. And the YouTube replay will be up usually within like 2 to 3 days. Hopefully by Friday, we'll have that up. And then if anybody wants to forward that on to their colleagues, you know, other coworkers, we would love to be able to continue to share. As our audience was a little light and quiet this morning as the very first one for 2023. Come like May or June, usually we have a lot of people, 50 to 70. So we'll get this sent out to everybody. Again, if anybody has any questions for Miss Jeni, you can go ahead and put that in the chat, or just go ahead and unmute. What is, so I'm going to say this wrong. It's Crystalnani Park. I see that you're at hannahbuild.org. What is that organization?
Good morning. It's a nonprofit organization, but we collaborate with a lot of small farms within our rural community. So as
Okay.
part of what I do in the nonprofit, I'm a community outreach as well as an elder coordinator. But I also take part in Hawaii Farmers Union United.
Okay, I wanted to understand that before we ended for today. All right, Miss Denise, we thank each and every one of you for coming to our very first meeting in January, and thank you to our presenters. And for one, I learn so much each time that we have these meetings, and love to connect everyone. As I said before, we're all working towards the same goal. So let's just keep working together. All right, everyone, have a wonderful Wednesday, and thank you for attending.
Thanks, Carrie. Let me know what you need, okay?
Thank you so much.
Of course. I have the regular Wounded Warrior Project website is a great